The battlefield smelled like fire and fear, but Kale stood calm in the middle of it all. His armor was dented, his blade chipped, and his breathing heavy. Around him, alien soldiers dragged the wounded away, while others prepared to burn the dead. The war between humans and the Shari had started fast and without warning. Most said it would end quickly, with humans broken and begging for peace. But Kale wasn't the kind of man to bow. He had been one of the first to volunteer, not for glory, not for fame, just to protect what little was left of his world. Earth had suffered before, but this time the enemy came wearing crowns and cloaks, not claws and guns. The Shari Empire had ruled dozens of systems. They believed in tradition, strength, and submission. When humans refused to kneel, the Empire declared them a threat to balance. Kale had seen the balance they brought. Cities reduced to glass, families hunted like animals, and those who surrendered were made examples in front of their people. So Kale fought harder. And when the Yashari sent a special force to his colony, he joined the last defense with only a dozen men under his command. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. But Kale never gave up. The last battle ended in flames. Kale's team had held the ridge for 3 days. When it was over, everyone was either dead or wounded. He was the only one who could still stand without leaning on a weapon. That's when the dropships came, not human ones, but the smooth, curved crafts of the Yashari. And standing at the front was High Marshal Vikroth. Vikroth was tall and old, his skin a dark blue shade and his armor decorated with the teeth of fallen beasts. He offered Kale a strange deal. The human would be spared, even honored, but only if he completed a traditional Shari challenge. He had to hunt the cave beast of Sirak alone, with nothing but a bone dagger and his will. The beast was known to crush even warships with its jaws. Everyone knew what this was. A slow execution disguised as honor. A test meant to break him. The other humans protested. They begged Kale not to trust the alien lord. But Kale accepted, not because he believed in the test, but because he had no choice. He was a soldier. He followed the fight wherever it went. And this time, the fight had taken him deep into the wild lands of Sirak. The first night was cold. The second was colder. The beast left tracks the size of shuttles. Kale followed the marks with burning lungs and frozen feet. The knife in his hand felt useless. He had fought machines and monsters, but this thing was different. It didn't fear him. It didn't even recognize him as prey. It was just nature in its purest form. Big, ancient, unstoppable. On the fourth day, Kale stopped running. He stood in a narrow valley of black ice, face to face with the creature. Its breath was steam. Its body was armored in thick scales. Its eyes glowed in the dark like moons. Kale didn't roar. He didn't scream. He just moved. Fast, sharp. His knife cut between ribs and his shoulder-rammed bone. He broke his arm, lost half his blood, and still stood when the beast stopped moving. When he returned, no one spoke. The Shari lined the throne steps in silence. Vikroth stood frozen as Kale dropped the beast's broken skull at his feet. Kale's armor had been destroyed in the fight, so he wore the bones instead. Plates of beast hide and carved jawbones wrapped around his shoulders and chest. It wasn't fashion. It was survival. By Shari tradition, no one who wore the bones of a beast they killed could be refused, not by the court, not by the people, and especially not by the one who sent him to die. Kale didn't wait for permission. He climbed the steps and sat on the lower seat beside the throne. The nobles gasped. The guards raised their weapons, but none dared move. Vikroth slowly nodded. A rule older than the empire itself had been invoked. The human had survived the trial. He now held the right to speak, to lead, and to be heard. Kale's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Now, you listen to me," he said. The chamber was silent after Kale's words. No one expected a human to speak with such strength. especially not after surviving the trial. The Yari nobles looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. They had never seen their traditions used by an outsider. Kale sat still, his hand resting on the skull helmet in his lap. His body was covered in bruises and wrapped in leather made from the beast's flesh. "I am not your enemy," Kale said calmly, "but I will not kneel to anyone who throws lives away for pride." A soft murmur moved through the crowd. "Hi." Marshal Vikroth watched Kale carefully. The old alien had lived through many wars. He had seen brave warriors rise and fall. But there was something different about this human. He had taken their customs, their laws, and used them like a sword. Now he stood as one of them by their own rules. "You have the right to speak," Vikroth said, his voice cold. "But that does not mean we will listen," Kale nodded. He didn't expect them to change overnight. But his words weren't just for the nobles. They were for the warriors, the servants, the broken, and even the slaves who stood in the shadows of the chamber. He turned his gaze toward them and raised the beast's skull high, showing what he had done alone. A small figure in the back stepped forward. She was thin, shaking, and missing most of her teeth. Her skin was pale, her clothing simple, and her eyes wide with fear. She had once been taken from her planet as a servant to the nobles. Her name had been removed, her language erased. She had forgotten what freedom meant. But now, looking at Kale, she felt something inside her shift. Vikroth followed her gaze. "Do you think this changes anything?" he asked Kale. "You survived a test, so what?" "You are still only human." Kale stood slowly. His body ached, but his voice didn't shake. "You called me human when you sent me to die. But your traditions say I am now something else. You can't have both." The nobles whispered again, louder this time. Some were angry. Some were afraid. But all were uncertain. Kale wasn't asking for revenge. He wasn't threatening war. He was using their own truth against them. And it was working. The young servant girl took another step forward, then another. The guards reached for their weapons, but Vikroth held up a hand. She walked all the way to Kale and dropped to her knees. "May I speak, warrior?" she asked softly. Kale looked down and offered her his hand. "You don't need permission anymore," he said. She rose with his help. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly. "He's the first one to look at me like I am a person, not a tool, not a thing. You call him human, but I call him leader." The chamber fell into silence again. No one stopped her, no one dared. Vikroth finally stood. His armor shimmered in the hall's light. "What do you want, Kale of Earth?" he asked. "Power? Wealth? A seat among us?" Kale shook his head. "I want the chains to break. Not just for humans, but for everyone you've stepped on. I don't want your seat. I want your system to fall." His words hit like thunder. The nobles shouted in protest. The guards tightened their grip. But others, silent workers, forgotten servants, wounded soldiers stood taller. A few even nodded. Vikroth narrowed his eyes. "You challenge everything. And by tradition, we must allow it. But tradition also allows us to answer that challenge in combat." Kale smiled for the first time, then let it be combat. "But this time, the world will watch." The old servant girl beside him didn't step back. She stayed close. She no longer felt like a shadow. She felt seen, heard, and safe. From that moment forward, the war stopped being about territory. It became a fight over truth. A human had taken the bones of a beast and walked into the heart of an empire, not to destroy it, but to shake it until it woke up. The next move belonged to Vikroth. The arena had not been used in generations. It was a giant stone circle carved into the mountain itself, surrounded by thousands of seats, all filled with beings who had come to see the challenge. Some came to watch Kale fall. Others came hoping something different might happen. The air was tense with whispers and old songs of war. Kale stood alone in the center of the arena. He wore the armor of the beast he had killed. Bones covered his shoulders, and the skull rested on his belt. He didn't hold a weapon. The alien nobles had refused to give him one. They said a true warrior didn't need steel if he claimed to be tradition's voice. Across from him stood Vikroth. The High Marshal wore ancient armor passed down from his ancestors. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that betrayed his worry. He had never fought a human before. He had only sent them to die. The servants lined the edge of the arena. Many of them had never spoken in front of their masters. Now they stood in silence, watching the only man who had spoken for them. The girl with no teeth stood closest. She held a small flag made from her old slave robes. It waved like hope in the dusty wind. A drumbeat started, one slow strike at a time. It was the rhythm of judgment in HFY culture. Every beat meant the battle drew closer. The people cheered. Vikroth stepped forward, raising his weapon, a curved blade etched with old victories. Kale didn't move. He kept his eyes on the marshal, but he was not afraid. He had faced worse. In the dark forest, the beast had been silent and brutal. Vikroth, for all his strength, had already shown fear in his words. That gave Kale an edge. You could walk away, Kale said as the drums slowed. Change the law. Give them their names back. You don't need to fight me. Vikroth shook his head. If I don't fight, I lose power. If I lose power, the old blood eats itself. They fear you, but they fear freedom more. Kale stepped forward now. Then let's end it, not for me. For them. The signal was given. The crowd rose. Vikroth charged with speed and strength that bent the ground beneath him. His blade swung wide, cutting through the air with deadly force. Kale ducked, rolled, and used the marshal's momentum to strike his side with a knee. The alien stumbled back, surprised by the human's movement. Kale didn't wait. He moved again, fists flying, body light but full of power. Every hit was sharp and controlled. He had trained alone on ships, on rocks, in silence. And now, it showed. Vikroth countered. He was not weak. He struck back, cutting Kale's arm and forcing him to back away. Blood dripped, but Kale didn't fall. He looked up, breathing hard, and nodded. The battle lasted minutes, though it felt like hours. The crowd went silent. Every strike echoed through the arena. Dust rose, blood mixed with sweat, and both warriors began to slow. But only one of them fought for more than pride. Kale caught Vikroth's wrist and twisted hard, forcing the blade to drop. With a final burst of strength, he pushed the marshal down onto the stone. Kale placed one knee on his chest and held the skull of the beast above his head. I don't want your crown, Kale said loudly, voice shaking but clear. I want your people to stand, all of them, names returned. Chains broken. You said this is tradition. Then honor it. The crowd was silent. Vikroth lay still, his armor cracked, his pride shattered. He looked up at the human and did something none expected. He nodded. From the edge of the arena, the servants gasped. The girl with no teeth dropped her flag and stepped forward. Others followed. One by one, they entered the circle. No one stopped them. No one dared. Kale stood and stepped back. He looked at the broken sword, at the faces around him. This was not just a victory. It was the start of something much larger. The arena, once a place of death, had become a place of awakening. And Kale, the human once sent to die, had become their first true symbol of change. Asterisk, the village lights dimmed as the beast's skull was placed before the council. Rai stood tall beside it, his body still wrapped in parts of the monster's skin and bone. The elders could barely meet his eyes. According to their ancient law, any who returned from the trial of beasts wearing the creature's bones had the right to lead. The alien leader who had once sent Rai to die sat frozen in his seat. His face showed no anger, only fear. The people, young and old, stared silently. They had never seen this before. No outsider, no human, had survived such a trial. A small child whispered something to her mother. Then, slowly, one by one, the people bowed their heads to Rai. He looked around, not with pride, but with heavy breath. His hands still trembled from the fight. His legs still carried pain. But his voice was strong. "I do not want revenge," Rai said. "I want change. I want peace. I want this tradition of exile and death to end." The crowd shifted. Some looked confused, others relieved. One elder stood up. His eyes were red with age, but sharp with wisdom. He nodded slowly. "You are not one of us," the elder said. "Yet you returned, you fought what we feared, and you lived. The law speaks, even if the leaders do not." The alien leader rose. His robe fell from his shoulder. "This law is old," he said. "Too old." "He is not our blood," Rai stepped forward and pointed to the bones. "But your God said I must wear these to be heard. I wear them now. I am here. I speak." A long silence followed. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Then, in a voice both low and powerful, the elder spoke again. "The gods test not the blood, but the soul." He passed. He speaks. We listen. Gasps rose from the crowd. The alien leader clenched his fists. But he could not fight the words of the elder. He could not fight the law he once used to kill. Rai knelt before the council. "I ask for no throne. I ask only that no other child be thrown to beasts. Let the trial end. Let this mark its last day." The elder looked to the others. Slowly, they nodded. One by one, they agreed. The trial would end. The law would change. The people would no longer send their unwanted to die. Rai rose and walked through the crowd. Some reached to touch him. Others stepped aside. But none blocked his path. He had become a symbol, not of power, but of hope. Outside, the stars had started to show. The cold air bit his skin, but his heart felt warm. From behind, a soft voice called his name. It was her, the girl he had saved before the trial. She held a small bundle of cloth and bread. She offered it to him, her hand shaking. "I saw you fall," she said. "I thought you died. But you came back. You're like fire. You don't die." He smiled, took the bread, and nodded. "No one should be left behind. Not you. Not anyone." She followed beside him as he walked down the path. Others joined too, silent, watchful, hopeful. A new line was forming. Not one of blood or rule, but of belief. Back in the village, the old leader sat alone. His power had faded. Like dust and wind. His chains of fear broken by the one he thought weak. Rai looked to the mountains. Where he had faced the beast, the sky now looked open. He did not know what tomorrow held. But tonight, they had taken the first step. The stars above blinked gently, like old watchers smiling down. And among them, Rai's name would now be known not as a man sent to die, but one who dared return with a new way. He walked on, with people behind him, not as a ruler, but as a flame they chose to follow. Rai stood at the edge of the forest where the trial had begun. The land that once promised death now felt calm beneath his feet. The place had changed, or maybe he had. Behind him, a small group gathered quietly. They were not warriors or leaders. They were the ones who had been cast aside, just like he had been. There was an old mother holding her son close. A limping worker with scars down his arms. A girl with broken teeth who hid her face behind a hood. They were the forgotten ones. But today, they came without fear. Rai looked over them and took a deep breath. His voice cut through the morning air. This place will no longer be used for exile. No more trials. No more death for honor. This land will be for healing now. The people did not cheer. They nodded. They stood still. but something deep inside them lit up, like a spark given to a dying flame. The beast's bones had been burned the night before. Rai himself had lit the fire, not to erase the past, but to bury it. The ashes were now scattered in the soil. The monster that once took lives would now feed the roots of new trees. From the village, the elder who had supported Rai arrived slowly. His steps were heavy, but his eyes were bright. In his hand was a carved wooden staff, a symbol of ancient judgment. He handed it to Rai with both hands. "You came to us as a stranger," the elder said, "but you leave us as a guide. The people have chosen you to lead not by force, not by law, but by heart." Rai did not take the staff for power. He took it for duty, for the ones who still feared to speak, for the children who might one day stand where he had. The former leader of the village never came. After losing the council's support, he vanished from public sight. Some said he returned to his mountain house. Others said he fled in shame. Rai did not care. The past no longer held weight over him. He spent the next days building shelters near the trial grounds. The forgotten ones came to help. Brick by brick, a new place grew, a refuge, a learning hall, a healing center. And every wall told a piece of their journey. One day, the girl who had brought him bread returned. This time, she wore clean clothes and carried a slate of wood. She asked him if she could learn how to write. Rai sat with her beneath the same tree he had once rested under before his trial. He drew the first letter into the dust and watched as her fingers followed carefully. "You have strong hands," he said, "hands that can shape the world." She smiled and nodded. Word of the changes spread across nearby villages. At first there was silence, then came visitors, then came help. Some brought supplies, some brought stories, some brought tears. All came to see what a human had done where they had only known death. Years passed. The land bloomed again. Trees grew tall where blood had once been spilled. Laughter replaced cries. Children ran freely near the edge of the forest. The air no longer smelled of fear. Rai grew older, but his spirit never bent. He taught, listened, worked, and built. He led not from a throne, but among the people. And when asked why he stayed, he always gave the same answer: because someone had to show that tradition can change. The wooden staff, once a symbol of judgment, now hung above the door of the healing house. It reminded all who entered that strength was not in rule, but in compassion. Rai never claimed to be a hero. He never asked for songs, but the people sang anyway. Quiet songs, songs of survival, songs of hope, songs of a man who returned with bones and gave birth to peace. And when he finally rested beneath the oldest tree, they buried him with no gold, no armor, only the cloak made from beast skin and a stone that read one simple line: he came back. His story did not end with his death. It lived in the hearts he touched, in the laws he changed, in the children who now learned to read by his tree. And so, the man once sent to die became the soul of a new world, one not built by chains, but by choice.